I'm Danny Hirschfeld, and this is Different Thinking. Has the world gone mad? We're all well aware of the political crisis in which Israel finds itself. It looks extremely likely that we'll be heading to a third election in the span of just 1 year. Many Israelis believe that the sad state of our political affairs is a moment of only in Israel. But the truth is that we are seeing similar and even worse situations of political instability in a number of countries, which perhaps indicates a change in trend throughout the world. In the past couple of months, there have been widespread anti-government protests, some of which have been violent in Hong Kong, in Chile, in Guinea, Indonesia, Australia, in Spain, Russia, Algeria, Iran, Iraq, and Lebanon. In the UK, the parliament reached such a state of paralysis that it was almost impossible to disband it in order to call new elections. And in the US, Congress is preparing to impeach the president in an attempt to remove him from power. So what's going on? In the past, we've also had waves of protests and political instability. For example, in 1848 in the kingdoms of Europe, in 1989 against the communist regimes, and in 2011 in the Arab dictatorships, what we call the Arab Spring. What's different today is that each of these protests seems to stem from a different complaint. As well, the political instability isn't just affecting autocracies, but democratic countries as well, like the UK, the US, and here in Israel. So what's the common denominator beneath this wave of instability? Apparently, it reflects a worldwide change of attitude, showing a major weakness of the system of democracy. Democracy rests on the principle of majority rule, but implicit in this principle is minority defeat. This principle can only maintain stability when the minority, which could constitute 49.9% of the population, has an unshakable faith in the governing institution. Today, in an era of expansive access to internet media, every issue is presented by the opposing side as a matter of life or death, which renders the ruling party completely unfit to rule, and vice versa. So what happens? Citizens feel more distance from their government and more distance from citizens with differing views. The United Kingdom is no longer united. It has become a kingdom divided between those who wish to leave the European Union and those who wish to remain part of it. And to citizens on both sides of this divide, it no longer matters what the government wants or even what the majority of the citizens want. Perhaps we've reached a watershed moment in history where people see their own wants and needs as completely superior to the majority wants of their society. In other words, it no longer matters to me what the majority decides, since only me and perhaps my family members should decide on matters that affect me, even if I'm in the minority. We are seeing protests in many places that are much less open and democratic. In these cases, the phenomenon is even more pronounced. In Iraq and in Lebanon, the main issue that sparked protests against the government is the government corruption. But why now? Does anyone believe that corruption in these countries just recently started? Have you seen the palaces of Saddam Hussein? Did Lebanese Prime Minister Said Hariri just now accumulate enough wealth to pay hush money for his affair with a South African supermodel? In the end, these protests against corruption in Arab countries, and even Hong Kong's protest, which started over a rather marginal transfer of authority to China, flows from the same desire of citizens across the world to pull the plug from government life support. The whole world is beginning to realize that politicians of every stripe have personal interests, as does each individual voter, and they no longer want their lives dictated by others whose interests don't align with their own. It's vital that every government regime take these feelings to heart and withhold any legislation that impacts personal, intimate decisions of individuals. As well, the most effective way to stamp out corruption is to take the power of personal decision from the ruling class and to minimize as much as possible the amount of money that flows through the bureaucracy. If this can be done, we can restore faith in government institutions and see a return to more stability in our nations. I'm Danny Hirschfeld, and this has been Different Thinking.